Welcome back to the podcast, Nidhi. We are so excited to dive into this topic. I think it's something that's really top of mind for a lot of women, and especially since majority of our communities are women. Um, they'll extract a lot from this conversation. So my first question is, how does Ayurveda interpret libido and sexual energy? Libido and sexual energy. I just said libido.
I do that all the time on accident, just like rolls off the tongue that way.
Especially, so glad to be here. It's always such a pleasure chatting with you girls. But of course, now the understanding of libido has evolved over the times that the texts were written, right? So initially, libido there was no mention in the first three ancient texts of libido for women. But they did mention libido for men, and they said how it was such an important function of health. At the same time, they talked about libido in different seasons, how that was to be honored. Libido comes from the health of all tissues, comes down to the last tissue, the shukradhatu, or the reproductive tissue, which is really nourished when everything else is nourished. It's a great indicator for health. It's an important function of life. And of course, we can go into little details and aspects of those. However, when the later Sahitas was written, or the later scriptures were written, for example, there's a Yoganda Ratnakar that brings to life libido or fertility, conception, all of this for women. What has taken my interest over the last few years, last couple of years more so, is understanding how libido relates to health in female bodies, right? And while it was really not much touched upon, what Ayurveda does provide you, right? So before the scriptures even start talking about anything, they give you 4 tools that can be used to create new information, to understand the world around you, right? So for example, how can you make the inferences? That's a tool, that how you take information from this part of the text and that part of the text and how you use them together to come up with a theory. So what the text has allowed you to do is that as time progresses and human beings evolve, as we do as a species, you're able to take the same principles and then make new conclusions, right? Find new applications. So when I looked at it that way, what really struck me was that how a libido for, like a woman's libido is really firstly not talked about, in some cultures even looked down upon, but is a real indicator of her health and her fertility, right? And the fertility, again, has nothing to do with your ability to conceive. I mean, it has something to do with it, but what I mean to say is that fertility is important whether you want to have children or not, because it's really about your health. And one of the greatest ways to measure that is your libido. Like the easiest, simplest way without having to go to a laboratory is you ask yourself, what is your libido like? And I'm going to leave it to you for further investigation and questions from me rather than going all into it.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree. I think that coming back to the Ayurvedic principles and like the way that the Vedas had this wisdom is that's supposed to be dynamic by nature. So we're meant to dance with it, given the relevant times. But yes, come back to, but what are the parts of it that don't ever change? And that's the parts that are dynamic and can be malleable. So I love that you said that. I think that is so important. And I love that you also brought up the point that women, it's not just for women who want to conceive, that fertility is the birth of a new idea. Fertility is that creative energy, life force that we all have within us. And we're actually seeing that being stunted. I mean, if you just look at our culture in the Americas right now of like how women's voices have been muted for so long and how their creative ideas haven't been put into this earth, that's a fertility issue as well. That is one of the problems that we're suffering right now. So before we get into this whole epidemic almost of women and fertility, I'd love to hear from your personal experience. What has been your connection with this sacral chakra energy and libido?
Right. And I will tell you, right? So Angelica, there are like a couple of conversations around this, right? One is about that whole sacral chakra and the release of fluids from that, the blockages that happen. And there's another conversation which I think has not been had, and which is a conversation that has been inferred by me. And I think it makes, I feel like that idea has been pretty bang on from what I can tell, right? Which is what determines fertility. And we can get into that after this, right? What determines libido? What determines fertility? Why is there a lack? Now, coming to the sacral chakra and the blockages, right? I think actually it kind of again goes back to that, because I'm going to ask you a question in return to kind of highlight my point, both of you, right? When you look at fertile land, let's just forget a woman. When you look at fertile land and you have nothing to do with gardening, you're not a botanist, you go and buy a piece of land and you want to test for its fertility. What is the one thing a couple of things that you're going to look at when you see the soil?
It's going to be moist. It'll probably have like an earthly smell. And if you really want to test it, I would probably plant something and see if it grows.
Right. But the first word that you said was moist, right?
Yeah.
And, there's comedians who joke about this concept. Where they say a woman is, I'm going to just say it, like warm and moist. And that's how our reproductive fluids are. And this takes us back to the most fundamental concept of Ayurveda, which is the essential. We are warm and moist beings. That's what it takes to create fertility. The moisture keeps things moving. The warmth disintegrates anything that's stuck. At the same time, creates for life, creates an environment for transformation. Warm and moist is what creates. The lack of warm and moist, and we are, this is basically, I always keep going back to this concept, and the lack of warmth and moisture in your lifestyle, in your mindset, in your diet, often leads to that kind of dry, desert-like body and mind. Also, that can prevent flow, create blockages in your sacral chakra, makes you hold on to things. Anything that's warm and moist just flows. Anything that's not will stay stagnant. And as a species in our generation, wow, there is a lot of experience that we have with that fear, with that shame, with that guilt, and all of that. And we can talk a little bit more about that in the ending as well, the feminine and the masculine energies and how I've started interpreting them and how they create blockages in our own mind. But between these two, right, the misunderstanding of the feminine and masculine energies and how we can use them both, and B, the creation of this environment, which is warm and moist, and the retention of this environment, which is warm and moist. I feel like with these two concepts, we can significantly prevent, the lack of libido, the lack of fertility, the lack of health. We can prevent that. And we can create an environment which fosters better relationships with others and self, as well as lead up to everything that builds up to libido. I think your libido is your ultimate test for how ready are you to be in a relationship with others and yourself, and to create. And I think that's what we are here for. We are here on this planet, on Earth, to connect and to create. And your libido tells you that. And we can go into more of the reasons why we as women, as a whole generation, women, men, we all dry out excessively. And why that happens.
I have a question just to set the stage. So can you describe, and I think this is going to be different for every single human being, but like, what is a healthy libido? Like if someone wants to check, like, where am I on the scale? Because I think this is something sometimes we're so disconnected from. We don't even know what actually feels healthy and right in our own body. So can you kind of lay that out for us?
Right. So of course, in terms of when you talk about frequency, it could be different. There could be somebody who has, if you're, for example, if you're kapha in your body, which means you're already like a nourished or, building person, you could want to, your libido could be active every day of the week. If you're pitta, then it's systematically active. If you're vata, then it's a little bit harder because vatas are dry. Again, you're away from the dryness, like you're away from the moisture, so you're drier, right? So that being said, it's different. But basically, when you're in the company of an appropriate partner, and there is exchange of energy involved, and if you cannot feel the arousal, there is a problem. There are certain seasons which are more conducive. The winter, for example, is a better time. You naturally would have a higher libido in the winter. So if the libido is suffering in a real summer month, it's not so much of a concern. But as the time gets cooler, you want to experience better libido, right? So it's the experience that you have in the company of somebody that you share chemistry with and you exchange energy, whether it's through touch, through conversation, through smell, through any of your sensory organs. And where does that take you?
And I want to explore your thoughts on that a little bit, something you just said. So, and I think women sometimes have this idea that, like, I feel like for men, it's like they can be instantly aroused. So it's like, oh, they're in the presence of their partner, they're ready, let's go. For women, there are a lot of other factors at play. So can you talk about that too?
It's amazing that how the text said that, right? So the text said, right, that I'm trying to recall the Sanskrit name for it, because it's not the Shukra Dhatu, the Shukra of the female, which is not just all your reproductive fluids, but you're basically the ejaculate of the man resides in his groins, in that neighborhood. But for a woman, it actually resides in her heart. And it's like ghee, when it can be truly, when there's true passion, just as ghee melts and just spreads and crawls everywhere. So the ghee can be in its condensed form. These are the exact words used in the ancient scriptures. Just as ghee melts, beautifully spreads its presence everywhere, smears. Similarly, when a woman feels true passion, that Shukra Dhatu can then make its way into the entire body and really light up a woman. So when it says that, what it really means is that our hearts have to be involved. Anatomically, we are designed for our hearts to be involved. We have a different chemical reaction. When a man, when you have actual intercourse, there is a vata aggravation, there is movement, and there is vata aggravation. But a woman becomes ready to receive. Her body changes differently. The mechanics of her body change differently. And for a man, he gets ready to give. And of course, they reach a moment of perfect union. For that, those few moments, right, where they kind of lose their body, they lose their sense of identity, and they merge. And then the woman becomes a receiver and the man becomes a giver in the physical understanding of the process. And because of that ability to receive, a woman's body needs to be ready differently from a man's body. So it is anatomically physiologically a different process for a man and a woman. And how they interact and how they engage in this process is also very different. Unfortunately, we have become very dry. It's universally become difficult for us to receive. Like I often say, we start out in adolescence, we start out as grapes. We start out plump, everybody has nice collagen, supple skin, and then we end up as raisins. And the journey from the grape to the raisin is the journey that you need to kind of stretch as long as you can, protecting those fluid elements. And as long as we can do that and we can keep that alive and keep our senses engaged in the right manner in the world, you're protecting your youth, your fertility, and your health. And a lot of what we do goes away from that.
And thinking from the physiological standpoint first, so you mentioned that libido is translated to Shukra, which is the last tissue of the body. So for our listeners, we talked about this on the podcast, but there are 7 tissues of the body. They're called dhatus in Ayurveda, where we are able to digest not only just our food, but our emotions and everything. And so our health, and we can relate to certain imbalances that we have to certain tissues of the body. Now, it's interesting that the product of all the health of all these tissues of the body is Shukra, is this libido that happens in the 7th tissue. So from this perspective, do you think that there is any specific tissue, like any of the first 6, that may be involved in a lot of these imbalances with fertility?
So I'll tell you, okay, firstly, Anjalika, the way I think I would like to also put it is that the libido is not the Shukra, but the ejaculate is the Shukra, which is a result of the libido. The ejaculate is the Shukra. When you talk about all the fluid tissues, right? So there's some fluid like the rasa, the plasma, the lymph. That's again liquid, and that the first nourishment goes to your rasa. So how is your rasa nourished? And rasa and rakta, which is roughly translated to your blood tissue, right? Now these flow throughout your body. They actually nourish all the other tissues as well, right? So and they're liquid tissues essentially. So the health of these two are very, very important. Not so much, I would say, mamsa, but again, meda has a little bit of that liquid quality to it, right? Again, when you come to majja, which is like your sclera and your nervous tissue, all of that, that has a very subtle aspect. So everything, that's why, unless that fluid, that essential soma, that fluid is nourishing every aspect of your body, every single tissue, it cannot make its way towards the shukra. And that's the reason why it's so important. It's not just something that you do and it's done easily. It needs to be nourished really, really well. We need to replenish that moisture within us constantly and consistently.
So on a physical level, what are some ways that we could start to do that and then eventually get into the place where, like, energetically, what can we do to work with some of the things that are going on in our life that might be blocking some of that flow, that moisture?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, of course, I think, and there's a psychosomatic aspect to it. So once I'll say in terms of what you can do physically, right? Of course, I would say including good fats in your food, also including ghee and milk for those who are not, who are not completely plant-based, I would say, because ghee and milk, like A2 milk, A2 grass-fed cows, organic milk, really goes back and replenishes those tissues. Ghee is called, it's jivanya. It really supports life. It supports the basic function of life, the reproduction of life. So ghee and milk, abhyanga, massages, right? And overall inclusion of good fats in terms when it comes to your food, that's very important. Not to choose what not to choose, right? Not to choose dry foods, not to choose diet foods, not to choose skimmed milk, anything that's too dry or too heating or too cold. They're all going to create stagnation, blockages, really kill that fluid element in your body. Even in terms of lifestyle, right? Grounding practices, meditation, breath work, enough sleep, meeting your friends, walking in nature. These are all warming. They're warming to the soul, and I feel like I tell people, you don't have to even look at what's warming. When you meet a warm person, it's a warm person. You feel it, there's and nobody has ever had to explain, hey, what's the meaning of a warm person? I've never heard that. Everybody knows. Because we crave warmth as human beings. And so just think, when you think about what are warming practices, and this grounding, loving practices, moist practices, which is all of this, like I said, sleep, abhyanga, breath work, meditation, they all release certain neurotransmitters and chemicals in your body, which are more fluid, which are more loving, which are more gentle. When you look at it from the psychiatry point of view, you really, all of those are more calming hormones and neurotransmitters. Late nights, stress, being extremely stressed out, being booked to the point of having no time, all of those things, the current lifestyle, which doesn't allow for any kind of rest, time off, peace, all of that, right, can create this dryness in us that exists. So then going for the reverse practices is definitely, of course, again, this comes to herbs. There is overuse, misuse of things like kombucha, apple cider vinegar, chilies, peppers, all of those things. Again, there's an overuse for that. But there are herbs like shatavari, like licorice. All of those are warm, those are cool, those are moist, really, really moist in their essence, so that they can go and support this. So I think overall, just slowing down, right? Slowing down, consuming these nourishing, moist foods at a warm temperature really go a really, really long way to preserve the fluids in your body. And then abhyanga, of course.
And now that I'm thinking about like the energetics of libido, maybe this is like a dramatized version from movies, but like I always picture a little bit of the fire element and the passion. So like, how does fire play into this? Because we know that fire is heating and it's drying, but like, does there need to be a part of that in working and increasing the libido? Do we need that in the energetics of the passion, or like in the physiological stuff? Like, where does that come into play?
Absolutely. And that fire is set for a woman, that fire is secondary to the water, because if you just have fire, you're going to just be, you're going to be angry. You're going to be an angry woman, just a snappy woman, right? Because the softer elements, it's that fire. When I said in the beginning, that passion that melts the shukra in the heart, that is that gentle fire that is required. So yes, that warmth is absolutely a part of it. But I would say it's that gentle infusion of warmth into your mind, into your body, into all of it. When you look at the energies in the universe, the Shiv and the Shakti, right? It's called the Shiv and the Shakti. The Shiv is related to the fire aspect of it, the masculine aspect of it. The Shakti is the female aspect of it, which is represented by water, by soma, by the softer elements. And together they come. And it's the passion from the mind, from the man, in an energetic sense, that passion that evokes the passion in the female body. And when you said a man gets aroused so quickly, it's because he has to provide that passion to the woman as well. Of course, we've evolved as a species, we've changed, and we are able to, and it's important. It's just natural course of evolution, where because our own masculine, for the whole generation, our masculine was subsided, and it's kind of come up now, right? So there are times that we're able to self-infuse our passion, but for a true union to happen, it's the feminine and the masculine energy in you, which merges with this feminine and masculine energy in a male partner. And when you can have that accurate balance and do it right, that's when there's equal passion on both sides, and there's a true union at a cosmic level.
Do you think that culturally how women are using sex and their own sexual energy plays a role in this epidemic of infertility? And I guess I'm referring more closely to casual sex, or actually being truly attracted to that person and partner. Do you think that being really intelligent about the way that we use our sexual energy can play into this?
You're so right, Angelica. It's 100% true, right? I think because it's such it's a preserved dhatu, it's a treasured tissue in our body, and more so for women, right? For a man, he's able to produce shukra more easily in his body than a woman is able to in her body. And that's why, like in the Vedas, they say the man will plant his seed anywhere, right? And a woman, but it'll only grow in a place where it's fertile, right? And it's ready. So for us to preserve that, to preserve the nature of those tissues, I think it's not cultural, it's not about a stigma, it's just a sacred responsibility to our body, as well as intercourse, right? Like a true union, again, comes from the heart and the mind and the body and the soul for a woman, according to the Vedas. And I think as we've all experienced that at some time, that, intercourse with somebody that you truly feel connected with feels a little different. It's a little bit more meaningful. And of course, we're all free to experiment in the ways we think are right. But I just think it's a great point that you brought up, that understanding the sacredness, keeping away the stigmas, but understanding the sacred nature of this essential tissue that we carry in our own bodies is extremely useful. And to just be, I think, just to even think that the man just has to plant the seed, like it's no work. We are the ones who nourish the seed, and we have that ability to do so, to keep that soil fertile, to keep that internal environment fertile is again, it's a huge responsibility. So I think you're absolutely right about the way we conduct ourselves in our sexual encounters.
Yeah, and I think it's just that extra piece of making it conscious, of just having that intention behind it, of, is this a person that I do want to have this sacred union with? And it's not to shame any woman for making any decisions that she makes about her body, but just having that extra bit of intentionality, I think, can make a huge difference.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's that consciousness. And sometimes even if just when we keep the person out of it, even it's just when I am engaging in this, right? How present am I? Right? Whether it's with your spouse, your partner, or somebody you've just met, but how much of myself am I bringing into this practice? How much am I? And I feel like that when you talk about tantric practices and you talk about that, it is that practice of losing your physical state to merge with another. And I think as active, as anybody who's sexually active, this is a consciousness that needs to be kept. And usually the one thing that I encourage people to do is just exhale and practice relaxing their body in the process. And instantly, things begin to flow, and you lose and you lose that chatter that happens in the mind. You're just truly, it's actually your body is designed to go in trance very quickly during intercourse when you're actually able to do that, because it's designed, it's a time that's ripe to go into trance. And we all need to practice trance away from the substances. I think practicing trance and training your brain to go into trance is hugely beneficial when it comes to manifestation and understanding the transience of the world around you. And the reason why we are, as human beings, this was introduced in the practice, right? So we are designed according to the Vedas, that why do we experience trance first in a sexual activity? Is that when a human being is born and suddenly your senses all open up. So the baby can't connect to anything but the mother. And it's just, I want to nurse and cuddle, that's it. And then suddenly the eyes are working, ears are working, nose, mouth, and the world becomes this wondrous place. And we start engaging in the world through our senses. And then we hit adolescence. And then the ultimate experience is intercourse. It's the ultimate experience of the world, right? That's how it was designed. And in that ultimate experience, you experience a moment of trance. And in that moment of trance, when you lose your identity and you have a heightened state, there is a knowing, oh, there is a state beyond this where I can lose myself and get in touch with the universe. And through this practice, eventually, right, the goal is to reach enlightenment, not always using sex, but sex is just where it begins to give you a glimpse into what is possible when you really then start balancing your own feminine and masculine and get those to merge. So at a worldly level, you experience it temporarily with another man. And then when you start doing the yoga and the breath work and the other practices, you experience that same union within you. And that's when you go to another dimension.
Yeah, I find that so interesting that the sacral chakra almost acts as a portal to that, because it seems like, oh, it's only the second chakra, but we have this great opportunity to completely merge with the other and go into this different state of consciousness. And that makes me think, like, can we have that same portal in the third and the fourth and the fifth chakras too, and that greater potential for expansion that maybe we haven't tapped into yet?
100%. I mean, it only begins in the Swadhisthana, in the sacral chakra, right? So the stirring, the base chakra is the most grossest chakra, the grossest emotions. It's the hardest to stir. All of our, fear, shame, guilt, all of that is stored in the base, absolute base, right? So even when people talk about hip shaking practices, it's to kind of at some point get those things to stir up, in one way or the other. And then that can trigger, again, the Swadhisthana, the sacral chakra, the second chakra. And when these two chakras have enough energy release and the energy is kind of left loose, and when you've done the right practices, they automatically transcend. Then there's a transcendence that happens and it gets stuck in your heart. And then when you're in your heart, you experience all heart opening experiences in the world. And when you keep practicing, then it goes into higher, it goes into your pineal gland. And then you experience mysticism, say things you connect to an outer verse. And then from that place, there's potential to transcend even further. But I find it just amazing that how it's all designed for all the work that you have to do, fighting with your inner demons, then feeling the passion in your third chakra, then having real heart opening experiences, which is only possible once you worked on your triggers, which are on the lowest chakra, right? And then from there, you can experience really life-changing realities.
So you alluded to the mind chatter a little bit earlier, and I kind of want to dive into that because, like, let's say on a physical level, you're doing the abhyanga, you're eating all the ghee, you're feeling good, but then as soon as you go to like be in that experience with someone, the negative thoughts take over. It's like, oh my gosh, do I look sexy? Am I doing the right thing? Like, what is he thinking? What am I thinking? Like, how is that blocking things, and how do we overcome all of that?
Right. And you're absolutely right, Rachel. And I feel that's why the work that happens in the Muladhara, in the base chakra, even before the sacral chakra, really frees up the sacral chakra as well, right? So the Muladhara is where all of this these stories are kept, the shame, the fear, the guilt, I'm not good enough, I'm not this. I feel like a constant work of self-awareness and working on yourself before this and after the process of the intercourse is, of course, and I think, of course, meditative practices help as well. At the same time, right? Now, when you are actually experiencing exhales, when you're actually focusing on breathing from the back of your head into your throat, into your back of your head, and you're exhaling and you're relaxing your body at the same time, it is actually not possible for the chatter to continue in the same way. I would say in the first 10, 12 breaths, yes, you may still experience chatter, but you don't actually know, and you've gone into a trance. And with the pheromones of your partner, right? When you experience and when you engage all your senses. So what I encourage people to do is close your eyes, smell, to inhale what you can inhale, because your body is designed to pheromones will also put you in the trance, right? Experience the touch and focus on your breath. That's all the capacity that you have to do. If you're nasal, your olfactory sense is engaged, and your touch is, and you're focusing on your touch, and you're focusing on your breath, and you quickly relax your body when you do that. It is almost impossible, right? And also, I actually want to say one thing, and I think all women should know that. So the way we are designed actually is that the visual sense actually takes the back seat when you're in intercourse. The other senses take over. So you actually don't notice things that you actually don't notice gross realities, physical gross realities. You may miss them. You may completely miss certain aspects, whether it's sometimes bodily hair, you just don't, because if you're so present in the process, and sometimes actually men find it easier to be present in the process than women do, and you're so present in the process, and you also have the power to play into the energetics of the other person. The more present you are, the more present they are. The more present they are, the more present you can be. And when you do that, there's this whole thing of how am I looking does not even matter. It's not even noticed, because we are designed for that sense, for the visual sense, to just be like shutting off. It's so deeply connected to this part of your brain that puts you in a trance. And that's why sometimes when people are even drugged, you see their eyes like all go, like I can't see. It's the first thing, the blurred vision is the first thing. And that's exactly, I mean, that is the experience that sex is supposed to bring you, done that way. It's just so much easier. I feel like there is no reason. You never have to read Kama Sutra. You just have to go back into your own inner reality and allow your senses to have this heightened experience.
I love that. Always coming back to the five senses, which is amazing. And I feel like so doable for people listening. And for those listening, so we've talked a lot about libido and sex and those types of things. Can we connect the dots on that and fertility? So say someone's listening is wanting to get pregnant and they're like, okay, I don't care about any of this. Like I have a goal and that goal is a baby. Like, can we take that leap and kind of connect those two?
Got it. Perfect. Right. So these are the few things that I'll tell the person. Okay. First, already make sure that your body is kept moist and warm. And now what does that mean? Start by just giving yourself a loving massage, allowing, and feel the touch when you do, right? When you use oil on your body, it's called sneha, which means love. Feel that self-love. Start there. Make sure your foods have good fat in them, right? Of course, you want to be exercising and you want to be consuming everything that's warm and cooked. Those are important aspects as well. But start making sure that your foods are cooked by you in a loving manner. It's a project for you. You want to get pregnant, give yourself 6 months and do all of these things, right? So I would say you start consuming foods with good fats, freshly cooked, exercise, right? So you're already starting to bring in some moist elements into your body. Slow down to experience the finer things of life, whether it's music, whether it's aromatherapy, like heighten your senses in ways which are, of course, you eventually want to get to, feeling heightened experiences when you are in intercourse, but you start out of the bedroom as well, start experiencing finer things to your senses. Take a break, I would say, meditate, sleep well. Right. And visualization, again, I think is also a very moist practice. People actually, sometimes when they're visualizing, they start crying and they're like, I'm not even sad, because it really releases that kind of moisture in your body. So I think when you do all of this and you do all of this in combination and you give yourself a few months and you start engaging truly with your senses. And then I often tell people, right, when you've been able to do all of this and they automatically feel good about themselves, they're like, why didn't I do this before? Why didn't I do this Abhyanga and slow down and just use my senses differently? then I say start getting into your feminine. Actually start getting into your feminine, right? Which is surrender, which is curious, which is creative, which listens more than asks, because curiosity is our strength. Investigation makes it a little harsher. And when you get in touch with yourself that way, you automatically become this ready to receive. Fertility has a lot to do with, are you really ready to receive?
Mm-hmm.
And when you kind of do some of these practices, of course, there may be some technical blockages and all of that, which herbs, etc., can help. But if you're just planning to have a baby and you want to create that right environment, I would say that these are like great places to start. And then you'll automatically see, as you start getting into your feminine, feeling sexy, which is important. Feeling sexy is a very important aspect of it. Allowing yourself to feel sexy, to feel the flow, you'll engage differently with your partner. And then you'll see your libido. Your libido will tell you where are you? Where do you stand in this? So look at your libido as a cue. And then I think things will flow and happen.
And I really like how you left that up to women following their intuition and picking and choosing where to start, because I think that is the most important part, is that so often women want to outsource their intuition, which is our greatest superpower, when really it's all about coming back to trusting all this knowledge and wisdom that we have within us. And of course, Ayurveda is a science that supports that, because it tells us all the tools and techniques that we want to support our intuition. And I think that's why it's so cool right now too, that, for example, it's really popular for a woman to follow the moon and study what astrological sign it's in, because the moon represents our mind and our emotions and our divine feminine self. And I think that's so cool that women are like, it's so silly, I'm like into the moon right now. And I think that's just showing us that culturally we're moving in a way where the divine feminine is rising in that way. So we're also interested in things that are the unseen, like seeing angel numbers, or, oh my gosh, I knew that friend was going to call me before they called me, and those type of things. So whatever your curiosity is of where you're leaning into your intuition, trust it. And then that'll open up the doorway of what your next steps will be. But at first you have to start engaging with that intuition and flexing that muscle first.
100%. And it's one of those muscles where the results are actually exponential. It's not like, oh, I've done this exercise for such a long time that it doesn't even work anymore. It's the opposite. It's like, it took me a long time to get here, but once I've gotten there, I have mastered this, right? So you become a master manifester without even meaning to manifest anything. And again, I love that you brought up the moon. I just want to highlight, right? So the moon is associated, like you said, with the divine feminine, with the fluids, with the soma. Like when the moon is high, we know there's high tide because of the moon. So that's a representation of that moon. The moon actually affects all the fluids in the body. And for a female body, that's especially relevant, because whether it's our periods, our reproductive fluids, our shukra dhatu, the moon is that representation of us, of the fluids on the planet, and more so the woman, because the woman is that fluid dominant. And I think this is actually literally the movement that I'm trying to bring about, is that come back to being fluid, hey woman, let's go back to being fluid, because this is our biggest strength, and it doesn't take away from anything that we want to do on planet today, right? I mean, I think it's a pretty unique strength. I mean, men can unfortunately never replicate it. We can do a lot, we can do everything that a man can do, but this is great. And we've actually dropped it. We've dropped this. We've gotten so much more into our masculine side and control and just power and ego and aggression that we've lost this.
Yeah. And I think that's also just indicative of when we get our menstrual cycle and just that perspective shift. I mean, even my friends I talk with, and they're like, I mean, how crazy is this, that we have to bleed every month and it causes us so much pain and so much, and it's seen as a burden, when really it is our greatest superpower, when we can heal all those other menstrual irregularities and really be in the flow of the rhythms of the moon, which coincide with our own internal rhythms. It's amazing. We can experience all these different moods. It's honestly incredible, because in the beginning of the month, it's when you have this creative energy and it's a lot of the kapha. And then when you're in the middle, and then you have this pitta energy, where it's like, all right, so I'm going to get shit done. And then we go into the vata, where it's like grounding. And I've created now this space in my calendar to just rest and then receive intuitive messages and feel really at home in my body and connected. Men don't have those rhythms. So that's another practical tool that we love using with our women, is just teaching them how to understand the rhythms of their own inner moon cycle and energetically, physically plan your life around that.
I love that. That's so cool. That's so cool. I'm just like, if I was a man, I'd be jealous of a woman. Just you have all of these, it keeps us in, and then I also say, right, like people are like, oh my God, you're volatile. I was like, as women, because we experience so many different things over the man. And I'm like, hello, what makes us volatile also makes us adaptable, you know, because we are going
Yes.
through changes all the time. We feel them and we move on like this. So like, don't judge our volatility, because it really brings our adaptability.
And this is something we've been talking about lately, and you brought it up, which is like, for me, what feminism used to be was like, could I be more like a man? Could I push? Could I not rest? Could I put myself to this point of exhaustion trying to get to the same place that they were? And recently I'm starting to really take another look at that perspective and understand that females are also, and the feminine is also really powerful, but it's like this raw power, this like power in being, this power in the creativity and things that, like, as a culture, we haven't placed enough, in my opinion, value on. But I think more people are starting to feel that same way, and we're waking up to that. So what are your thoughts around that? And do you feel like in your sphere of community, people are feeling the same way and realizing that this feminine power is the superpower?
Yeah, in fact, I was actually, I'm actually giving a TED talk like a TEDx this Friday, and that's my topic. Is
Oh my
actually,
God, amazing.
Yeah, that's so cool.
I fell on the same weekend. I'm actually same week, and I'm glad we had this conversation, because it's exactly that, right? Like I feel like like in the India that I grew up, it was said that the women were expected to be completely in their feminine, and they felt powerless. The female was supposed to only be in her feminine, and she felt powerless by the time she was in her 50s, 40s, 50s, and she felt like she had just surrendered to the point that she had given up everything that she was, right? And the man was encouraged to just be in his masculine, and which was just always be aggressive, never feel an emotion, never cry. And then there was a disconnect between the man and the woman, and things were happening, though the female was connecting with family members, the man was making money, but there was that union didn't happen the way it does. Then we changed roles completely. Then we went on the other direction. Feminism was not about the feminine. It was say, hey, you've taken away our masculine for too long. Let us bring it back. And then I see with a lot of women that I work with, when they're in their 30s and, they're craving a partner, but they're like, they don't know how to call upon their feminine. They've just been successful lawyers, successful bankers, all of that. But the whole essence of the feminine side, right? Like when you become a mother, those hormones are the highest in your body. And it's about dealing with unpredictability. The baby can poop anytime, can wake up anytime, and the mother is nursing away. There's a flow. It's being in flow, being feminine in that water is being in flow. And we kind of have lost that in overly structured, high achieving world. So you're absolutely right that people around me and people that I work with, especially Rachel, have been like, hey, and they've been so much in their masculine. And when they want a relationship, but if you're in your masculine and the man is in his masculine, and such women often only want men in their masculine dominant energies. You could be with a man with feminine dominant, and that would work. But if you want to be with a man who's in his masculine dominant, or with any partner with masculine dominant, masculine is battlefield, it's war. But I feel if we learn when to call into our feminine, like when I'm with my children, when I'm listening to their sad story, I got to be in my feminine. When I have to ask them to go to bed, I can be a little bit more in my masculine, right? But to understand how we can hone and use both of them. And, that we don't have to bring our masculine to our friendships. You go out, you pick a restaurant, I don't care, I'm going to flow with you. But I'm in my work, I set my boundaries, and this is what I need. So like the whole game of understanding, right? From one end, we've come to the other end. But if we find balance, as you say, we have been noticing, and then we learn to call upon these energies as per our own will when we want to, I feel like we'll have the best relationships and we'll have the most successful careers.
Yeah. And culturally and religiously, I feel like we've just kind of shamed and like suppressed the jobs that are more like the stay-at-home mother or like that nurturing side of us. And finally we're like, wait, actually we can have those things and call in the masculine when we need it to get the shit done that we want to get done, to have the goals in our work and in our lives that we want to have. And like all of that's okay. And learning to find that balance, which I think will translate really nicely to the physicality of making sure that our libido is healthy and our fertility is healthy. So I feel like it's very full circle.
Yeah. I think they all come together, and it all comes together really beautifully. And the more I have these conversations, the more I understand that we are a blessed species. Being a woman has unlimited capabilities. Now, I just wish for all of us to really tap back into our feminine as well, so we can go, have the best relationships and have the masculine to know our boundaries, and to be able to ground ourselves in those great relationships we find. Otherwise, I'd say we'd either just become complete gypsies and hippies, or we become complete monks. To find something in between is amazing.
Awesome. Well, this has been such a fun and enlightening conversation. I'm so happy we had it today, and I can't wait to hear more from you in your TEDx talk. That's so exciting. And I think you have something new, or maybe you're just talking more about this topic in the upcoming year when I believe this episode will be live. So can you share with us maybe the beginnings of that project, or kind of where you're heading in the direction of supporting people with these crucial topics?
Yeah, I basically, one of the newer programs that I'm offering next year, I don't know if that's what you're talking about, is there's a couple of programs that I am offering in 2022. And one of them is learning how to read the scriptures. So I'm offering Ashtang Hridayam, 5 chapters and 5 chapters. And the reason why I like reading this, teaching how to read the scriptures, is because it's not, yes, there's a verbatim translation, but also like I go into like, how do you interpret this? Like, how do you bring in your own intelligence to this statement that you read? And just that experience should again translate into awakening of an intuition. So if it was just like, hey, let's open a textbook and let's read it, I mean, it offers me nothing. But how do you go deeper? How do you swim in this? And how do you immerse yourself in this? So again, and I think all of those again are those practices that awaken the divine feminine. And because they come from a structured place, you also bring in the masculine. So it's again learning to dance with these two energies. That is one program. Also, another program that I'm designing right now is changing your relationship with food. I feel like we always talk about it, we always do it, but I want to do a whole program around it where you can enroll and work with me in a group, so you change your relationship with food, which I think solves everything. That's the most, because all the other life processes, breathing, sleeping, they just happen a little bit more mechanically, a little bit more involuntarily. But food is the one life essential to life process that we do every day, and we can become conscious about it. And to bring consciousness into food is to bring consciousness into life. And basically it's back to that. These are the two new programs that you look out for. And I hope if you're listening to this, you look them up and they excite you.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with both of those, and we'll definitely have them linked in the show notes. And I love the last one about food. And I always say food is like the number one way we show ourselves self-care. It's like that, sustenance, that nourishment. So I think that both of those are just incredibly powerful for both, practitioners as well as just people looking to learn. So we'll definitely have those linked. Thank you so much for joining us again on the podcast. It's always a pleasure to have you on and to converse with you. And thank you so much, Nidhi, for being here.
Thank you so much, both of you. It's such a pleasure. I spoke about my favorite topic and I had such a blast. Thank you.
Love it.
All right.